There are a lot of ways that I could describe RWBY. Ambitious, creative, entertaining, the list goes on. But if there's one thing I can't call RWBY, it's being predictable, which is what makes this show so great. When the series first began, it seemed like your standard fantasy school show. It had your colorful cast of characters that aspired to become heroes as they fought the forces of evil, while also dealing with the usual high school drama such as love triangles. I was fully prepared for this show to spend the next several years at Beacon, as the show would end with all of the characters graduating after managing to defeat some great evil. But then Volume 3 threw all those expectations out the window as it flipped the entire narrative of the show on its head. Yang loses her arm, several major characters die, Beacon gets destroyed, RWBY unlocks a mysterious ability, Team RWBY is separated, and the narrator from the very first episode reveals himself to be the big bad. To this day, Volume 3 remains one of my favorite volumes due to its unexpected shift in tone and narrative. Though in hindsight, I probably should have seen the shift coming. It's not like the intro for the volume was being subtle. I went into this show thinking I knew exactly how the story would play out, only to be proven completely wrong, with me now not knowing what to expect next. And sure enough, the series would continue to surprise me, since every volume afterward would draw some new curveball. Now, one of the reasons that RWBY twists tend to work so well is because most of them aren't twists just for the sake of having one. While there have been a few to unfortunately land in that category, such as the death of Ziana Khan, most of the twists contribute something to either the character or the greater narrative as a whole. One twist that ends up contributing to both is the truth behind Oz and his history with Salem.
Hello, I'm Professor Ozpin.
Now, out of all the curveballs to come out of Volume 4, the one that surprised me the most was the fact that Oz was somehow alive despite dying at the end of Volume 3. I still remember being confused about how Ozpin returned and why he was a disembodied voice inside of this brand new character, Oscar Pine. The rundown that we're eventually given is that because Oz failed to defeat Salem in the past, he was cursed by the gods to reincarnate in the bodies of like-minded souls for centuries, with him now being the combination of all those souls. While I suspected that there was far more to the story than Oz was letting on, I had no reason to believe that anything he said was untrue. After so much mystery, the show was finally giving us some proper answers, with us now understanding the threat that all the characters were up against. The show could have easily won with this and called it a day, but instead, they decided to pull the rug out from under us yet again by revealing that Oz lied. Not about everything, mind you. He's still a genuine heroic person who has done his best to protect all of humanity from Salem, but he's not as innocent as he framed himself to be. For one, it wasn't so much that it was the gods who cursed him, but rather Oz accepting the God of Light's task of uniting humanity so that he and his brother may live among them once again. But should humanity still be divided when they're summoned, then they will wipe them out permanently. Now, Oz initially rejected this task since all he wanted was to be reunited with Salem, who, surprise, was the love of his life. But when he's told that she doesn't reside in the afterlife and is alive on Remnant, he instantly accepts this task. At this moment, he wasn't motivated by his altruistic nature, but rather his desire to be reunited with Salem. Yet this ended up backfiring big time, as he eventually realized that Salem had gone insane with her seeing humans as beneath them. This resulted in one of the most messy divorces I've ever seen in fiction. But the surprises don't end there, since the biggest bombshell of the Lost Fable is the reveal that Salem is immortal and cannot be killed. This reveal changed everything, as we see the characters spiral downward in depression and anger, with them questioning what to do now. Oz locks himself away in Oscar's head in shame, and we the audience are left theorizing as to how Salem can be defeated. However, all these twists lead to positive character growth from Oz, since thanks to Oscar's willingness to trust in others, he realizes that he was wrong to keep his secrets from his allies. In turn, their anger towards Oz has diminished, since after keeping secrets from Ironwood out of fear over how he would react, they now better understand why Oz made the choices that he made. Speaking of Ironwood, his ascent into villainy is another twist that caught many RWBY fans off guard. Yet while some will argue that his turn to villainy was forced, this is a twist that had been staring at us in the face all along but was cleverly disguised.
I will sacrifice whatever it takes to stop her.
Ironwood is introduced as a friend of Ozpin's who generally means well, but red flags are already being raised given that he arrived in Vale with his military forces in tow. Between this and how he would later undermine Ozpin's authority by reporting him to the Vale Council, it foreshadows how far he'll go to keep people safe, but fails to understand the negative consequences his actions will create. We especially see more of this in Volume 4, in which he has begun to take drastic measures to protect Atlas by putting an embargo on dust shipments before ultimately closing Atlas's borders completely. Now what made this clever is that due to mainly interacting with Jock, RWBY managed to mask Ironwood's villainous undertones by having him explain his plans to a character that the audience is made to hate. But when you push your hatred for Jock aside and ignore how he's only focused on the loss of profit, he isn't wrong about Ironwood's action being insane. This will not only negatively affect the rest of Remnant, but everyone in Atlas is being held prisoner with them not understanding why. His ascent into villainy comes to a head in Volume 7 as the heroes arrive in Atlas to see all of the military forces mobilized, with Mantle being a borderline police state. While the heroes are disturbed by these sights, Ironwood frames himself as reasonable as he recognizes that he doesn't seem very trustworthy, but that everything he's doing is a temporary necessity. As soon as Amity is completed and he warns the world about Salem, Mantle won't face any more hardship. But as problems start to get in the way, we get scenes of him considering things such as declaring martial law on Mantle and contemplating if Salem's lack of humanity is what makes her so powerful. Despite the brave face that Ironwood puts on, he's not the same confident character that he was when he was first introduced, since due to the fall of Beacon, he's terrified of Salem and he's allowing that fear to amplify his worst tendencies. It seems like all it would take is one more bad thing to send him completely over the edge, and for a moment that seemed to be the case when he ended up spiraling at the Snee Manor due to Watts hacking the kingdom's security and the Grim invading Mantle. But after an entire volume that centered around Ironwood allowing his fear to take control of him, he seemingly conquers that fear due to being reassured by Oscar and RWBY that they still have a chance to turn everything around. For a brief moment, it seemed like Ironwood wasn't going to become the villain that the show had foreshadowed him to become. But that wasn't to be the case, as seeing the black chess piece on his desk and meeting Salem brought back all the painful memories of Beacon, with them serving as his breaking point to become a full-on villain. RWBY played a long game with the twist of Ironwood becoming a villain, as he started off as a genuine well-meaning person who wanted to protect people, only to allow his fear and paranoia to take hold of him, with him no longer caring about the people he vowed to protect. And then comes Volume 9, the most twist-centric volume of the entire series.
Team RWBY. You finally made it.
Whereas previous volumes at least had somewhat of a clear path despite all their twists and turns, this was the most unpredictable volume due to how heavily it leaned into being a mystery. At the start of the volume, Team RWBY discovers that they're in the fairy tale world from the girl who fell through the world, but they slowly discover that the events of the story don't coincide with the things that they encountered throughout the Ever After. Now, unique thing about this volume is that while previous volumes will have the viewer be privy to information that the leading characters are unaware of, that was mostly absent in this volume. So we were just as in the dark about things as Team RWBY, with us only discovering new information when the characters themselves discovered it. But for every answer that we did get, more questions would be raised, with the volume also having a lot of misdirections. For instance, the Curious Cat was a character that provided answers about what the Ever After was, the nature of Ascension, and insight about Alex. But when John enters the picture, he ends up contradicting information that the cat gave, such as how Ascension is deaf and that Alex has a brother named Lewis, a piece of information that the cat never brought up. But then the volume has some of John's information be incorrect between the people pleasers explaining that Ascension isn't death and Curious Cat revealing that Alex didn't exchange her brother to the tree to return to Remnant. Instead, Lewis returned home, but Alex was killed by the cat due to wanting to stay and fix her mistakes instead of taking them to Remnant like she promised. Volume 9 had one misdirection after another, and it all worked perfectly because of our two unreliable tour guides. Since Curious Cat withheld information, it made it hard to believe how much of what they said up until that confrontation with John was the truth. But then because John doesn't have any answers about how to escape the ever after despite how long he's been there, with him not being the most stable individual as a result, it raises doubt about John's answers about Ascension and if his assumption about Lewis is even right. I was convinced that after Volume 3, no other volume would be able to surprise me as much as that one, but Volume 9 proved me wrong. RWBY is a series that has constantly surprised me, in which just when it seems like older pieces of the puzzle are coming together, new puzzle pieces are drawn into the mix. This show could have been your standard fantasy school series, but RWBY instead chose to abandon that premise completely, with them giving us a far more engaging, rich, and complex story that has managed to keep me guessing for years. But how do you think RWBY has handled their twists? And what are some of your favorite RWBY twists? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to hear me ramble more about RWBY or other animated series in general, check out my YouTube channel Pedanticat, which you can find a link for in the description box below. Until next time, catch you later.